Hello there, friends. On today's episode of She Wonders Why, I had the pleasure of speaking with Rachel Elizabeth. Rachel is a philosophy grad student pursuing a career in philosophy turned comedian. And I saw that in her Twitter bio, and I just had to know the story behind that. So she shares how she ended up going from philosophy into comedy, and she gives a lot of really interesting behind the scenes look at what goes into being a comedian, what it's like for a female comedian, and what the community is like in different places. We talk about social media and how nowadays you really do have to have a following in order to really make it. And we talk even about like freedom of speech within comedy. So there's a lot of interesting little avenues we go down. I think you guys are going to find it pretty like informative and interesting, and also I laugh a lot randomly throughout because she's so funny. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Please leave me a question or a comment, and I have her Twitter information and her blog in the description, so have a look at that. And this is an 18 plus interview, just to be clear, so make sure there's no little ears listening. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. So, okay, I just need to make a quick mention that Rachel has a wound and she was bit by a dog. And we're just going to move on.
Yeah, move on.
We're moving on.
My Band-Aid is on fleek, so
you
we're
might
good.
not even be able to tell. So people might be like, oh, I didn't know, but now I know. But like, oh, well, we're moving on. So anyway,
Right.
Okay. So, okay, Rachel, your bio is very interesting on Twitter because it starts off with like philosopher turned comic, and like your comic particular specialty is kink. And I'm just like, wow, that's a journey. So can we like talk about what do you mean philosopher turned comic? Can you tell me a little bit about that background?
Yeah, so I started doing comedy when I was in graduate school, getting a master's degree in philosophy. At that point, it was the program I was in. It was a terminal MA program, but I intended to like apply out and get my PhD. And when I applied to grad school as a philosophy major in college, my dream was become a professional philosopher. And I started doing comedy. I started actually performing stand-up comedy. I believe my second or third year of grad school. I don't know. I have like no concept of time. But it was right after my dad died. So my dad died my second year of grad school. And then, I believe I started doing comedy. He died in the fall of my second year, and I started doing comedy in the spring of my second year. So 2017. And I guess kind of the deep explanation is after my dad died, I started going to therapy for kind of exposure therapy regarding just things that happened between me and him when I was a child. And I think I started to feel like further alienated, I guess, from philosophy, just because a lot of the, feelings I was having regarding my father and kind of that complex relationship made me I don't know, I guess I started feeling alienated, and I definitely needed an outlet. And so I started doing stand-up comedy. It's something that I'd wanted to do for a while, and I'd actually been writing it but not performing it for about a year before. It's like crazy, like up at 3 a.m., like, not doing any of my term papers, but like writing these insane sets about like I was getting fucked in college by a guitar player that, like, I don't know, like fucked me while he read J.D. Salinger. It was like insane. It was like insane shit.
Yeah.
So stupid. I cringe at some of my like old material, but like anyway, so I had been writing it. And then when my dad died, I felt, I was going through this intense therapy. Everything in my department just felt weird, like participating in, conversations about moral philosophy when I had like all these complex ethical kind of judgments that I was making towards my father and what happened in the past. And I was like, comedy is something I've always wanted to do. And I think very quickly I kind of felt at home in this environment that kind of celebrated contradictions and like celebrated absurdity.
Yeah.
And so that was just very exciting for me, I guess. And then there's a lot of other reasons, I think, why I was like, okay, comedy over philosophy. But I guess the main reason was I just kind of fell in love with it. And it made I don't know, it made me feel like my way of seeing things made some sense, I suppose.
Like you
And philosophy.
did not in the absurdity you found a home almost.
Yeah, yeah, and I think like also just like being around people that kind of had, similar trauma or kind of, saw the world in a way, picking up my bite wound, of course, saw the way, yeah, I guess saw the world in a way that was similar to me and maybe saw the world in a way that was like informed by, trauma, but at the same time having that urge to laugh at it. Like
Mhm.
I guess I had never found a community of people that kind of um felt that way, the similar way that I did. And so it was just a lot of it had to do, I think, why I fell in love with it is I met so many great people right off the bat in the comedy scene where I was in grad school.
I actually was just talking to someone who's a political philosopher, and or he was saying that Socrates says that philosophy kind of equals comedy plus tragedy. So like that's I don't know, maybe oh man, I may have butchered that. Sorry, Stephen.
No,
But like
no, no, no.
but that's I don't know like well because you look at like Plato's Symposium and there's a comic in there. Like there's a comedian in there along with the other philosophers, and he kind of lightens the mood. So and it's like part of it. It's part of like comedy. The idea of you going to comedy from philosophy is actually not that odd when you think
I
about it.
agree. So in terms of just kind of I think what's really interesting about comedy and philosophy is that the one crucial difference that I think I was kind of articulating earlier is that in philosophy, or at least the philosophy circles that I've kind of been around, there's this central kind of tenet, for lack of a better word, that's like, you can't have P and not P, right? So you can't have a contradiction. Whereas in comedy, I think all the best jokes, right, are kind of
You can have P and
about,
not
yeah,
P.
yeah, a lot of what's humorous, and there's a whole theory of humor called the incongruity theory, where it literally is P and not P. That's what makes things funny, right? And so, besides that crucial difference, I think there is a lot of similarity between the two because a lot of it, I think both areas, so much of it relies on like identifying these kinds of distinctions, identifying things that don't make sense, identifying like small weird, like when you're doing philosophy, it's like, okay, like what's, I'm going to critique this view, what's weird about it, what's not right. And I think when you want to write a joke about something, you look for those same kinds of things. But I think, I mean, obviously the execution is much different, and what
Yeah,
counts as
yeah.
successful versus successful argument is like radically different, right? And kind of in the way that I was talking about before. But yeah, no, I think that's a great point.
That's
That makes
cool.
sense. I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I love seeing little connections that you wouldn't think of, because I legit was not thinking that they were connected before, and then I was like, oh right, but they kind of are. So
yeah.
yeah, so okay, or you mentioned in something, I think your little video you did, you went to New York at some point.
Yeah, so I went to New York City mostly to pursue comedy. That sounds so lame,
But like that's
honestly.
where you do it. Like that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah, and I think I've always wanted to live there. I don't drive, and so the idea of taking public transportation and being able to have that kind of independence was also exciting to me. And so I applied for a job in higher education, just as like recruiter slash writing assistant. I got the job. That was super exciting, and so I went. Um, the moving in experience was a nightmare, but yeah, so I was there until from August to March, and then I left this past no, sorry, that's a lie. Um, August to May, and I left in May because of COVID.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Are you gonna go
uh,
back or?
I I don't know. I mean, I think that there are some things about New York City that I miss. I mean, it's an amazing city. I met some really cool people. Um, I wasn't a fan of the comedy scene there. I guess the obvious criticism is that just I wasn't there long enough to really immerse myself in it. But I definitely saw kind of, I guess, the comedy scene that I came from. It was a small town, and everybody that did comedy there was kind of doing it because they felt kind of like an outcast or kind of needed some outlet. And so, and I was like part of this feminist comedy troupe. There were a lot of people with like marginalized perspectives that were drawn to the comedy scene as like a platform to speak about, whatever they felt kind of stifled, kind of that they felt was kind of stifled otherwise. And so New York City is like very different. Like it's the industry. So it's like very cutthroat, which is honestly just another word for people being terrible.
Yeah,
And you also have a lot. Yeah. Right. You know what I mean? Like I'd be like, oh yeah, this girl glared at me and made a joke about me on stage after my set. And everyone's like, comedy's cutthroat. I'm just like, no, she's just
she's just a cow.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, she's terrible. And there was a lot of that. And I think that there's also a lot of people from a large amount of class privilege that are just like, whether they're living on their inheritance, whether their parents are, giving them some kind of trust fund to just pursue. And like, and if you're doing that, then that's fine. Like no shade, but there was definitely, I think, that kind of environment too, where the people that had the ability to dedicate all their time to going to mics, primarily those are the people that were doing very well. Right. And that's not to like say that other comics that weren't in that situation don't exist and that they're not killing it, but it really magnified the class issues of if you were from a certain social status, you have more of a upper hand when it comes to like succeeding in creative projects. And
of course, yeah, we don't have like the patron scene unless you have a Patreon that's very successful. We don't have like, oh, you want to pursue comedy?
Right.
Here, take my money.
Yeah. Oh no, totally. And I think like there was just and seeing a lot of people from that type of privilege like get on stage and make jokes about like
being poor.
Make feminist jokes.
Oh.
Right, and it's always like make feminist jokes, but then in the same set, just be like, I want to fuck a homeless guy. You know what I mean? It's just like, no, like, it's just.
It didn't work. So. It didn't work. You knew the truth. You're like, no, you don't.
Yeah, it was a weird. I don't know. It was a weird thing. It taught me a lot, though, and again, like I met a lot of cool people, but it was not the kind of it wasn't what I fell in love with, I guess, in a lot of ways.
Are you back there now? You're back home now?
So I'm actually living in North Carolina with my friend right now.
Oh, right.
She came and got me from New York, and so I'm just
she
like
saved you. She saved you from the zone.
She did. I know. Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful, and I'm like very lucky to be able to do that, and like I recognize that, but yeah, I don't know. So I've just been tweeting.
Yeah, yes, girl. Okay, so you've been tweeting. So I recall, I think that the one that made your tweet that made you was something about, okay, let me get it right. So wasn't it like are you funny or did your father love you?
Oh no, that one was did your dad love you or are you good at sex? No, the one that made me the one that went like viral, whatever, was did you have a happy childhood or are you funny?
That's not. Oh, I mixed them up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I kind of put.
Yeah,
I put them together.
It's totally you mix up the disjunctions.
Yeah,
I forgive. You. Aren't even really disjunctive.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
But there was one. So there was one that kind of just went viral, and
yes.
And like now you're like, oh, I'm a Twitter lady. So can you tell me about before that? And you made a little video describing about social media and what it's like for comics now. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think I made that video because I have definitely noticed since I have a Twitter following, just kind of people that, people that didn't follow me back, like people I would meet in person, right? That I then followed on social media that just didn't follow me back. Now that I have this following, they're following me back, right? And, I had people that kind of, snubbed me, now kind of sliding into my DMs, as they say. Mm-hmm. And, being, hey, kind of like an MLM person, like, hey, girly, like, what's up, and
wait, what's MLM? What's that?
Oh, like multi-level marketing, like pyramid scheme. Like, I don't know if you know that trope. But it's
yes, yeah. I just didn't quite know the lingo, but I was like, hey, like, do you feel like you would like to work out or something since you're a mom at home and it's COVID?
Right.
Like, no, I'm good, thanks.
Right, exactly. And so, I mean, I've had that, and I think that's kind of one point. And that's frustrating for obvious reasons. And then I think the other point that I was trying to make was that, a lot of success isn't the right word, but a lot of, I guess, getting opportunities in comedy, I think, and I think opportunities with any creative work you're doing now does have to do with like how much of a following do you have? Like, how much audience can you draw? And I think in one sense, like I understand why like people have that consideration. If you're running a show, you want to book people that can get an audience. But I also think there's a sense in which people that don't have that are just totally treated as worthless and totally treated as nobodies and losers, like regardless of how funny they are, regardless of, their actual talent. And I think that obviously is a problem. And so, I was definitely one of those, like, a lot of people have been saying, I want to see your comedy. You should be on Comedy Central. And I'm just kind of laughing because before I got this following, you know, comedians, nobody knew me. And when I was in New York City, I had 200 followers on Twitter. No one gave a shit about me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think
you said you were just as funny. That's one of the things that really kind of stood out to me. You're like, I was just as funny with 200 followers.
Yeah, no, and exactly. And I think I started believing that I was not funny. I started believing, oh, I'm hacky, I'm stupid. My stupid feminist / submissive bullshit is just like hack and terrible. Probably is, but
girl.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, I thought it was awful, but now I realize I'm great. Like, no, I hate myself.
I'm still a comic. I'm still a comedian.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right, yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So, but I think that it. I was just trying to tell people, don't let this whole idea of like your worth being based on your following, which unfortunately has become this kind of norm, right? Don't let that stupid norm like make you feel like you're not funny, because I was so many of these jokes I've said on stage and so many people have laughed. Have I been booked after that mic? No. Has the person that has more followers than me, who I've seen bomb on many occasions, are they getting booked many times? Absolutely.
Really?
Right? And so oh yeah, totally. And I think I totally allowed myself to start seeing my work as shit. And believe me, I've bombed plenty of times too, and some of my jokes are god awful, but I really started internalizing the, your worth as a comic is the number that you see on your Instagram and Twitter. And I realized that like, that's so stupid because it's so arbitrary, right? I got 5,000 followers overnight for tweeting some ridiculous little whatever. And now people are like, other comics, right, are now sucking up to me. And it's just like, It's so arbitrary when you become successful. And yet the follower number is treated like somehow
your value.
It just reflects. Yeah. And that's crazy. That's so crazy to me. And so I just wanted to say something about it. I don't know if I articulated it well or if I'm even articulating any of this well.
No, you are. No. So
that's just kind of.
So how do you get out of that? Like, when did they start looking at Twitter? Like, do you have any idea when booking agents started using Twitter as like a standard?
I have no idea, but I do know, because I had private social media before I moved to New York City, right? And so I remember when I got to New York City and I was like, wait, like following and whatever is so important. And everyone's like, yeah, have you been sleeping under a rock? And so I imagine that it's been going on for a while and I've just been out of the loop because I've been like in philosophy la la land where like, everyone's like technology, everyone's like stuck in like the 90s and people are just like, what's you know what I mean? I mean, at least, I don't know. I definitely had a lot of professors that were kind of the typical, not tech savvy, whatever.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, like, and that's the thing. It's like, and I guess my friends weren't really interested in social media or anything. I wasn't really. I was just like having fun doing comedy live all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely was like late to the game, and so I really have no sense of when that started. But it definitely started like way before I realized that it was a thing. So.
Right. Yeah, well, it is funny in the sense that like, you never know what sort of little tweet will catch, fire.
Right.
Because I'm sure that you probably are like, I have better stuff than the ones that went viral. Like, I'm imagine.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because I think that I love writing like long form comedy, and the joke, the joke about me that my comedy friends that know me really well, from the comedy scene that I started in, they have a joke about me that my jokes are a paragraph long, and I have these like long-winded and ridiculously kind of verbose jokes, and that is what I prefer writing. Like, I love writing. I'm trying to do a memoir slash comedy thing right now on a blog that I started. I love kind of writing a set as like a piece of writing that kind of has a story and a theme. And so like that is what I prefer doing. And I hate that I hate that with Twitter, it has to be small. And so
Well,
I do love
pithy,
like
yeah.
tweeting. Yeah, but it's a good practice. That's the thing. It's Twitter is a really good writing activity, and so I think I've enjoyed it in that sense. And it's and like I started Twitter in like March when quarantine started. I
Yeah.
was like, I'm going to invest in this.
Like
And I was so
so
lucky.
many people did that.
I know. And I was so lucky too, because I had so many awesome friends that were like in the New York scene that kind of knew how the algorithm worked and kind of like knew the ins and outs of when the times to tweet and this. And so I'm like
Yeah.
so grateful that I had people to help me. You know what I mean? But yeah, so it's been fun, but I think, yeah, I wish I had more chances to do the long form stuff, like for an
Yeah.
audience of that size. You know what I mean?
I know. Yeah. You're like, oh, like here's like 7,000 people that I'm
Right.
just
That'll
gonna
never know
perform.
right.
Yeah, and they'll
Yeah.
never know your favorite form. Yeah, yeah. So
They'll never know my 5 minute set of like giving head in Bed Bath and Beyond. It's incredibly frustrating. All my deep stuff, it's
the depth.
they
It's the
don't, yeah.
depth. Yeah, they're gonna miss out. So okay,
Right. Yeah, on the
why?
truth, yeah.
Why? Okay, so is how do you get out of it? Out of needing the social media following? It sounds like it's good for you now. Like, I know it's
How do I get
annoying
out
that
of
it
it?
had to happen for you to be noticed, but it doesn't sound like a bad thing. It sounds like an annoying thing when you think about it. But are you happy though that it happened?
Oh, of course. Oh my God, of course. And I think that I'm so happy. And I think that it's been amazing, and it's been such a lifesaver, truly, like in terms of my mental health, just during this time and like leaving New York City. And yeah, I mean, it's been amazing. People like and I have like so many philosophers that follow me. I'm just like,
Yeah.
how is it that I like leave academia and now I'm like gaining the respect of my peers as I'm tweeting about, like I said, like blowjobs and like
Yeah,
just
yeah.
ridiculous nonsense. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of surreal and crazy to me. But yeah, I'm happy about it for sure. I don't know if there's a way to get out of it.
Yeah,
I
that's what
don't.
I'm like, is there a way?
Wait, what do you mean by get out
So
of it?
you don't have to have a following to be successful in the business.
I Yeah, I don't think that's.
It just, but
I don't
I
think.
don't know. I don't even know if it's bad. Like, that's the thing. It's the way it might be like amoral, where it's like not good or bad. It might be like it just is the way things are.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, what do you think?
Oh, so like, I mean, just like one observation I've been thinking about is like, my job contract ended in March and I stayed until May. My mom was helping me out with rent because it's New York City. And like, that's the thing. Like, I criticize people like from coming from class privilege. Like I grew up upper middle class. My mom, has been financially supportive with things like that. I'm extraordinarily lucky. And I just think like, what if I couldn't just sit in my apartment tweeting away about my ex-boyfriends? What if I like had to ride the subway and like get to my fucking job during those 2 months? I wouldn't have had time to build this following. And so it's
Right.
like, you know what I mean? And so there's a sense in which I think it's weird, because on the one hand, I think social media gives people that wouldn't have platforms otherwise to say
Right.
what they want. But with
Yeah.
comedy specifically and working on a following, building a following, the time that takes and how much time you can devote to that, that's absolutely a luxury. And so,
Really?
oh, yeah, totally. Like actually getting good at it and like learning about the algorithm. Yeah, totally. I would not have had time to do any of that. And by the time my tweet blew up, I think I was already at like 1,000 something followers. And so I had already worked hard building 1,000 followers. I would not have had time to do that had I had to work. And there's so
Right.
many funny people that I know back from Florida that are people that have to work a 9 to 5 job every single day that tires them out, that when they get on stage, they are hilarious, but they don't have the time to build a Twitter following. They can't afford to move to New York or LA, you
Right.
know?
Right. Right. Right.
So You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's good. It was interesting talking about like the sort of class privilege in your industry, because I just thought you were all starving poor. Like, do you know what I
No,
mean?
and that's the illusion that everyone likes to paint. Everyone loves coming on stage in these thrift shop clothes. I live in Brooklyn. You know what I mean?
Or
Everybody.
Jersey, I had to take like the bus in from Jersey.
I take it right, right, yeah, yeah, exactly. No, there are some. There are plenty of people that are, on their hustle, and I think that's awesome. Obviously, but there are a lot of people who totally love playing up the starving artist image, but like their parents are funding their, Brooklyn apartment,
It's
and
like a pretty nice apartment.
right, yeah, and right, it's like yeah, it has a washer and dryer.
Yeah.
That's the standard for nice New York City. But yeah, no, it's
Okay,
it's
well
insane.
that's been shattered for me now, but that's fine because I like to know what's real. Okay, well, okay, so I mean, it's good to have someone like you explaining to those who don't have a following. No, you guys are good. Don't degrade your worth, and your the quality of your work. Doesn't an audience, whether or not they laugh, help with that?
So this is right. So this is the interesting thing. In New York City, it's really hard to get over the hump of just doing mics, which are primarily the audience is almost always comedians. And comedians are so stingy with our laughs. We're tired. It's kind of like
Oh,
the gym for us, right? There's a big hump between getting from mics to getting booked on shows where you have non-comedians that will laugh at you. And so if
oh,
you have a small following, you're not getting booked. You're going on stage at these mics and saying nobody's laughing at me. Well, nobody's laughing at you because we're comics. We're not there to laugh. We're there to work out our own material. It's very self-interested, you know?
oh, okay. Oh, I
So you
didn't know
can
that.
get in this, yeah, so like you can get into this like negative feedback loop of like nobody's laughing at me. I'm not getting booked, so I'm not really building a following. And it's just kind of like, you totally get in your head about it and think, yeah, I suck. And that's why I think comedy like chews you up and spits you out, especially in like New York City, because it's very hard to get over that hump
Oh,
between,
okay.
yeah. And one way you get over the hump is by having followers and saying, I can bring 11 people to this show. I can draw an audience of X amount of people. Look at my Instagram thing. Look how many likes I,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I got lots
But
of likes today, so book me. Yeah.
well, that's what people look at. Like, and again, like I'm not knocking the club owners and the showrunners that have to think that way
Yeah.
because it's a rat race for them too. Like to
Right.
make money to make ticket money, to make, to bring in money for a club. Like it's a sad reality. And like, it's just, I don't know.
No, I didn't know that. I didn't know about that whole like, oh, when you're starting out, it's a lot of comics who are like stingy with their laughs. Like that's something to think about,
Yeah.
man. Let's move into the you are a lady comic.
Yes.
So, how's that? I am curious about this because I've been I've like looked into why is it that men are they're more comedians or thought of as more funny than women. And I know like Christopher Hitchens has a thing on it about how, well, women laugh at it, so it's not that they don't get it. Clearly, like it's a performative sort of masculine, how to get the ladies so be funny, like that kind of an
That's the
evolutionary look at it.
that's Christopher Hitchens. And well, so
I'm
I
sorry,
do.
that
So,
just like sticks out in my head as like, why
yeah.
is it that men are typically more funny? But like, I'm really curious as to, I don't even want to say more funny. It's just perceived as more funny or go for it more.
Perceived as more funny.
What do you think? Okay,
So
so what do
one
you
thing I
think
will
about this?
say,
Okay.
well, I think it's bullshit that so anyone that would say that men are are funnier than women, I think that's, I think, and you and I think would both agree that that's obviously bullshit. I think that maybe I actually have a lot of thoughts about this, so I'll try to like pick
Okay.
the avenues that I want to explore here.
There are
I
more
do think,
men, like there are more men in the industry, right?
well, okay, so
Or is that not true?
maybe I actually I don't know. I don't like anything with numbers like stresses me out, so I don't look at it. So
Okay,
I'm
okay,
terrible at like citing empirical evidence, demographics. Ugh, I'm awful.
okay.
I will say that it is incredibly difficult to be a woman in comedy, um, for a number of reasons. I think the main one is that it's extremely threatening for men to see women be very, I guess outspoken might not be the right word, but it's emasculating, right? I mean, like it is, I think, this thing that men do. I've met some men that do it because they are like very tortured individuals, and like comedy is their therapy. And I enjoy a lot of that, like very irreverent kind of like neurotic humor. But then I've also seen men do comedy, and I'm not making it again. Like, I'm not making a humor judgment, an aesthetic judgment about the content of their humor when I say this. I've seen men, plenty of men, have like very funny sets, but I think it is obvious that they really do kind of value the fact that part of their masculinity, part of the way they live their life, is being this like attractive male comedian, or this very successful or charming male comedian. And I think that for a lot of men, it could be emasculating to see women do exactly what they do. I think, yeah, I think that also women in comedy are at a disadvantage because the misogyny kind of takes a toll on us, I think, because there are already like, so with a lot of shows, it's like, oh, the second there's like more than one or two women on a show, it's like, it's a ladies show, it's a feminist show. And so, especially in New York, I saw a lot of lineups where it was like one woman and that's it. So if you have one spot, if there's this kind of culture of there are limited spots for women on these really cool showcases, right? Women are naturally going to become so competitive against one another and try to shit on one another.
Okay.
And so I think that, this kind of like, attitude of there shouldn't be that many women on shows, or we don't want our show to become a feminist show talking about their vagina, blah blah blah, that kind of bullshit, like that definitely breeds this kind of a culture of like internalized misogyny where women start treating each other like shit. And so I think it's like, I complain about women that are mean to me, but I always try to look at it too as just like it's a structural consequence of this like kind of garbage, like patriarchal sort of, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, patriarchy bleeds into comedy as it bleeds into everything, right? And I think that the unfortunate way it manifests itself is that it pits women against each other, and I think that's probably for me been the hardest about being in comedy, because
there's only room for one lady in this show, like that kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's like there are limited opportunities for us, and so naturally we're going to be really competitive. And the interesting thing that I found is that women are super competitive, and I think male comics are competitive in the same way, but female comics especially are very competitive with other comics, other female comics that have a similar aesthetic or a similar content of what they're saying.
Okay, because I was gonna say, to give a perspective of like, I don't want to say devil's advocate because it's not even really like against what you're saying, but like,
no, I love that.
Okay, so if I was at a show, because I actually really like love watching comedians, like it's I love it. So if I was at a show where there was a bunch of like, there was a set of like 10 different people, and if 5 of them were ladies doing vagina jokes, I would be like, okay, can we mix it up like a little, right? Do you know what I mean? Like the similar aesthetic, like what you were describing, that there is that like competition between something.
So you're sure. So I take your point as something like, you could see why if there were 2 comedians that maybe their their shtick or whatever is making like a lot of like jokes about their vaginas, right? You're saying that you could see from the perspective of a showrunner who wants a good show, maybe let's only pick one out of the 2,
right?
Because you want a diverse array of topics covered or something. Right. That's like my charitable read of your point.
Yes, that is. Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And I don't like. I am so sorry if I'm offensive.
No. Oh my gosh. No. And even if you were like disagreeing or being offensive, I think that people can have conversations.
Yeah, I'm just
like
so
we
bad.
are at least, and it'd be okay.
I'm working on being more like, it's okay to be disagreeable on my show.
Oh yeah! Oh my gosh! I'm all for that.
Okay, so I think take that point.
So I think that from the perspective of a showrunner, if there are 2 comics that have very similar content, you're only going to book one of them, and that's why there is this kind of like just very pragmatic concern that women have because there's already limited spots. So there's this very pragmatic kind of reaction that women have when they see another woman doing very similar topics, right? And I get that. I do think that, there's also a stereotype that all women talk about their periods, or all women talk about, whatever in the exact same way. And I think that that's, one, not true. I think number two, most men talk about their dicks. Most men talk about sex. And so to vilify women as being redundant in some way because they're all talking about sex, it's like, well, that's a double standard. And that's, I think, yeah, you see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, like, well, I would see, maybe I am a little naive in this. I'm like, oh, well, if it was the same thing with dudes, where it's like, oh, they only do like dick jokes, so we don't want to have both of those guys up. Like, I was thinking similar. Like, I thought across the board, like, well, those two kind of do primarily like the dick joke category, so let's only choose one. Like, I thought it would kind of cross over, but does it not?
Parallel?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think based on some of the conversations I've listened to, based on like femme comedians that have been in comedy way longer than I have, it seems like there is that double standard. Do I think there exist showrunners that are kind of, maybe fair in judging, who they want in their show in an equal way? Yeah, I'm sure. You know what I mean? I'm sure there are people like that. But just from conversations that I've heard kind of by people with maybe had like more knowledge, and just in virtue of like doing it longer, it does seem that double standard is like very real.
Okay. Okay, so why? I know you said patriarchy, but let's get specific.
Okay.
Is it because women haven't entered the comedy scene? Like, okay, so I've watched the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Have you seen that? You haven't? Oh, you must.
Everybody tells me because I'm a comic I should watch Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and because I'm a philosopher I should watch The Good Place. And so just by everyone kind of telling me I should, I like don't watch either of them.
Oh, girl. Like, okay. I mean, it is a suggestion that would be good for you if you chose to do it.
Sure. I'm sure it would teach me so many things. I am like the most like I am like so contrarian in like the most juvenile way. You know what I mean? I still have that like angst of just like, if somebody tells me to watch it, I won't. And I need to.
Even though like I love Marcus, it's like I'm like, give me recommendations of what you think I'd like. But no, I'm not gonna watch this.
I don't know. And again, you know what? Maybe this is my internalized misogyny of like, I don't want to watch a show about another Jewish comedian doing well. Like, you know what I mean? I'm just like this
50s,
person.
Like from the 50s. It's just because you know what? It's because Joe Rogan was like, this is such a realistic representation of starting out. So then I was like, oh, I believe it then. Because like, I don't know. But like, oh, like someone who is a comedian, like,
I'm not
just said, oh, you're not a Joe Rogan fan?
I'm not. I mean, I guess a realistic. I guess I would have to watch it to know what Joe Rogan was talking about.
Well, because she starts from scratch, right? She didn't even mean to be a comic. She just ended up ranting about her ex, her husband cheating on her on the stage.
Oh, interesting.
But it's so Jewish though. I love it so much. So you're Jewish then?
Yeah.
You're like, I kind of said that. Yeah. That's fun. No, it's just so, whatever. She has matching hats with her dresses, and I just love that part too. But anyway, so it just shows that she's the only woman, except for like one other lady. Like that's the one other lady is who's successful that she kind of looks up to. Other than like Lenny Bruce is in it too, so that's cool. But okay, yeah. So it's cool, but it just is interesting to see a woman started back in the 50s, and then now I'm like, is it still like that? I mean, it must have gotten a slightly better from the 50s, right? But there's still men started off in the industry is what I'm kind of getting at. So.
I think I don't think I have a good answer, because I think that, so I think too, like the experience of, boys
club, like is kind of what I'm thinking, like, oh, this is our turf.
Oh yeah, I mean, I still, so again, like, so obviously, like, and I mean, like, this is like, I think depending on like how you're socially located, it's going to be different, right? So like my experience as like a white woman in comedy is going to be similar.
Yeah.
Right. It's not similar. It's going to be different than like people that are socially located different than me. I will say though that in the New York City comedy scene, I definitely did feel there were some mics that were a boys club, but there were plenty of mics that were not. There's plenty of
Okay.
queer mics. There's plenty of, but what's ironic is that a lot of those queer mics, a lot of those women only mics, that's seen as like the alt comedy scene. But and through many people regard that as like the alt comedy scene, like the Brooklyn scene that's much more queer friendly. The Manhattan scene that's kind of regarded as like the mainstream scene, the scene that like the industry or like clubs in Manhattan, you tend to like pull from or whatever. That is, yeah, I would say that is still very much a boys club. But the comedy scene where I started out, that was like a small scene. Yeah, there were absolutely problems of misogyny, and we had creepy men and stuff get on stage and say weird stuff about raping women. But I would say that it was much more of a feminist friendly scene, just because there were less people. And again, the comedy scene there was a very supportive place for people that felt kind of like misfits in a lot of
Right.
ways
Right.
to go. It is not a place for misfits, at least in New York City. It's a place for people that are really driven and really like wanting to be famous, right? You don't go because you feel you
Oh,
don't fit in. You go because you want to be famous, you want to be a star,
right.
right? Brooklyn scene a little less so. Brooklyn scene definitely people that are more kind of like, I have something to say, I want to go somewhere to say it.
Cool.
People in the Brooklyn scene are still plenty driven. There's still plenty of people working so hard that are very successful, that kind of are more in like the Brooklyn scene. But the mainstream Manhattan scene, yeah, like everybody there wants to be famous. Well, that's a generalization. A lot of
Right.
people there are doing it to be famous. Yeah.
With regards to you doing your comedy in, like, obviously from each individual is their own person. So I know this is slightly generalized, but what do you think that women bring to comedy that is missing that men do? Not this to disparage men. I'm not saying like they're missing it
Right.
in a bad way, but just experientially. It's just there's a like what do you think is the thing that you're like, oh, here's the comedic gold that you're missing, and we're bringing it, or us ladies, we're bringing it.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Can you be more specific?
I'm trying to think. So okay, so I've been really like interested in the feminine and how it's different from the masculine. So I'm just trying to suss out like, okay, what of your femininity comes into your comedy, I guess.
What?
Is that better? Is
Oh,
that a better question?
interesting. Yeah, yeah. So I would say, so a lot of my comedy explores these like tensions that I feel between my, political feminist values and my sexual preferences. And that's a bit of a trope. I recognize that. And it's not, I'm not saying I'm like original or anything. But I explore that a lot in my comedy. And I think that something that tends to get laughs is when I talk about these kind of, kinky, taboo preferences I have in a very feminine way. I'm in like a floral dress. My tits are pushed up. I'm in like little pumps or whatever, maybe have my hair up or whatever, like some very like, Zoe Deschanel meets someone who eats breadsticks 5 times a day. Like, yeah, like that. I think I, I I think, and this goes back to kind of like the incongruity theory of comedy, where what we laugh at is there's like this guy, actually at UNC Chapel Hill, I think his name's like Matt Kotzen, and he wrote a paper recently talking about how all humor is couched in like norm violations. That's like a whole nother topic. I'm really interested in this stuff though, and I do think that there's a sense in which when I play up this kind of like feminine docile persona and then say but I like it when a man makes me feel like I don't have the right to vote, like something so
Yeah.
ridiculous, but I do it in this like very feminine way. I think that gets laughs because I'm saying these things that people maybe typically regard as like sleazy or seedy and dark or whatever, in
Yeah.
this like way that people don't associate with like
The
a
feminist vibe.
nihilistic, yeah, like yeah, like the feminine vibe, like they don't really associate it with this like kind of like hypersexual, seedy, maybe grotesque to some type of
like the
content.
kink, right? The kink kind of thing that you're have in your bio. Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes I'm like, and this is the thing. This is the thing. I think so, I always joke about this, like in terms of like my kink shit. It's like, you know, I always joke like I don't like the actual like sex shop, you know, type of stuff. It's like, just take me to Home Depot. You know what I mean? Like I don't. Yeah, and so I think I maybe in some ways when I talk about kink, it's like a little bit more like rough around the edges and kind of unpolished. And I talk a lot about how like my sexual preferences in the past have kind of led me to, you know, pursuing like very problematic men that are not, you know, the kind of people that you should be engaging in kink with. But, you know, sometimes you have to make do, which I do not advocate. But I've been, you know, it just times in my life where I haven't cared so much about, you know, doing it properly or anything. And a lot of my comedy comes from those memories.
Those memories.
So yes, yeah. So I think that like when I deliver that stuff in a very feminine way, people think it's funnier, maybe because it's kind of the clash of these two.
Right. There's a dissonance between them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that embody how you feel about them? Like do you embody both sides?
So like, do I think there's a dissonance between being a feminist and being sexually submissive? Every bone in my body wants to say there's not. And I do have a very worked out view about kind of how to reconcile them. That being said, you know, I've read a lot of feminist literature. You know, Kate Mann, Down Girl, that book in particular is kind of the book that made me like really take a step back and grapple with these two things and say, like, you know, just because I'm consenting to these things, in what ways is my actions in the bedroom kind of like reinforcing, you know, maybe the views that men have about like wanting to subjugate women, and how does a man maybe go beyond the bedroom and start maybe consciously or subconsciously treating women in a actually like domineering, you know, fucked up way. And so again, like I want to say that I've reconciled those two things, but I don't think it's that simple.
Right.
And I try to use comedy when I feel kind of at odds with these two things. I try to write comedy about, find a way to write comedy about what I find difficult to like reconcile with, what I find absurd about the clash of those two things.
But that's what's funny, the juxtaposition of like, this doesn't at all fit with this, but like, let's just say them both together.
Exactly. Right, exactly. And I think that's something that I wasn't able to do in philosophy that I was able to do in comedy, that came so natural both to myself and my audience. Whereas if I'm giving a talk in philosophy, it's very hard to, you know, and I'm articulating this position that's like, these two opposite things exist at once, right? Like I'm going to sound dumb, and my people listening to my talk are going to be like, that's a horrible fucking argument. Like I can knock it down in a second, right?
Yeah.
And so ironically in comedy, and that's I think the main difference with comedy is that if you introduce a contradiction in comedy, your joke is going to be successful. If you introduce a contradiction in philosophy, your argument's batshit crazy. So I think that's something to think about. And, you know, I definitely think about this stuff a lot. And yeah, that's why I really appreciate you asking me these questions, because this is stuff that I don't often get to like talk about in this way. And
no, it's fun. I just, like I said, I just spoke with a philosopher for my last talk, and nothing was like, even though I love learning the stuff, it's like, oh, like I'm way less clear. I'm more clear, but less clear on what I think. It's like, oh, so this is the thing, and then their intention, and there's no answer. Like there's extremes and their intention with one another, and that's the end of it. And I'm like, oh, okay.
And that's how does it end? And those extremes, right? Like their intention with each other, but they exist together. Like that's
but then you're like, so let's make it funny and get a laugh, and then we can all go home and feel good about ourselves.
Right, exactly. No, that's the thing. And then no, you're so right about that. Like let's just laugh at it, because then we can, enjoy the high that laughing gets.
And it's the closure. It's like a closure.
Nowhere.
Yeah.
It's a closure with the fact that you're not going to have closure.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, right? Yeah.
That's why we laugh at the dark things, because it's like, oh, this is a horrible time, but then that made me laugh, and so I'm better.
Right, exactly. And I think that goes back to the tweet about the childhood. Like that's kind of what was motivating that tweet is that, a lot of being funny is and there's actually empirical evidence for comedy, which I'm sure nobody's surprised by. I always say empirical evidence. I'm just like, no, I'm a scientist. Oh my God. So embarrassing. But
you should just use
no,
put that in a set. Like, no, I'm a scientist. Empirical evidence.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I've put on lab goggles. But no, I think that there's evidence that comedy is like a coping mechanism for people that experience trauma. I mean, like so many like veterans with PTSD. One of the first things they do for therapy is like they have them do stand-up comedy.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so deep. Like the more I learn about comedy, the more I'm like, oh, it takes really smart people to do it. And it's so, there's so much more depth in it than you think.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Like that's the thing. Like, and this is so like the whole thing of the clown, right? Sasha Baron Cohen, like one of my favorite people. Like I think he's like such a genius. He, actually like studied at this school in France, this like very high esteemed clown school, and like was trained by this other, I don't know the person's name, but it was trained by this like very like a famous clown or something. And the point of the clown, as I was like reading about this, I forget where, like, is to actually like speak truth to power by just seeming so stupid. And so if you watch things like the Ali G show and Borat, and I think his more recent show, he's acting in this totally dumb, insane way, but he has these interviews with these like high powered politicians and just exposes them as being like racist, misogynist, anti-Semites, transphobic and everything. And I think there's something really powerful in speaking truth to power through speaking in a very stupid, feigned kind of stupid way, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah. And helping to, well, speaking truth to power, but also like speaking truth to like your traumatic experiences, I guess, and like overcoming.
Oh, yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, totally. I definitely relate to that for sure. And it's funny because I sometimes feel at odds with a lot of my like feminist comedian peers with this, but I believe like, and I hope this is like I hope that this, what I'm about to say is like, okay for your YouTube channel, but like, I think that if you are a rape survivor, make any jokes about your own assault that you want to, right? I think this idea that I've heard some people endorse that even if you're a survivor yourself, your jokes about your own experience might trigger others. I think, what, like that's a super, I mean, saying that someone that survived sexual assault can't joke about their sexual assault and can't profit
that's like
off
stifling,
of,
yeah,
exactly. I think that's so insane. Like that's so dangerous to me. And I think the thought that that's even at all a feminist view is like very misguided.
Okay.
So I have like so many thoughts on like the ethics of trauma / tragedy related comedy, because I think it's an interesting question, but like I definitely think that we should be careful in saying that the conversations about like, regardless of your own experience, you joking about your own experience is triggering. I think those conversations are sometimes like, this is where I think I disagree. We're talking about disagreement. I think that's where I disagree with a lot of like the popular feminist opinions on that.
Right. You don't want to limit people's ability to, I guess, do what they need to do. And, like if they went into this space to like get over stuff through laughing. What do you think about how far to go with regards to anything's on the table for, when you're on stage? You know what I mean? Like going there, like going wherever the there is that people are like, whoa, too far. You know what I mean? What do you think as a comic for that?
I think that's a really great question. I think that I'm going to answer it more as a philosopher in the sense that I think we do need someone needs to do it. It's not gonna be me because I'm lazy and I can never finish writing a paper to save my life. But so I'm not in grad school. But I think that we need we need an actual like framework on the ethics of that, because I think that on the one hand, I am like kind of, I think, more like pro free speech, maybe in some ways that people would consider unwoke, like with the rape thing. Um, but I also think that we need a way to articulate what the difference is between, like I said, a rape survivor making jokes about her own sexual assault, a person of color making jokes about their own experience with with racial oppression. We need a way to articulate the difference between the permissibility of that and just what that is, and somebody walking on stage and telling quote unquote jokes that are essentially just hate speech, right?
Okay.
That are essentially, like an example I can give, I've heard, at some mics, white women walking up and making a quote unquote joke about how, like, black men don't work. I've heard cisgender men go up to the mic and make a joke about how, turns out I actually raped a woman because blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't think that that's okay. I wouldn't say that anything goes with respect to that in terms of the permissibility. Now, do I think that we should have laws banning people? Like, I don't know. I don't know what I think about that. I think I'm probably not the person to even have a thought on that, honestly. But in terms of like I think that's harmful, right? I think the latter type is like harmful. But I think we need like a formal way to actually articulate it, right? Like an ethical theory of humor, I think would be like really cool and like really helpful.
And that doesn't exist at this point?
It could absolutely exist. I'm just now looking into the literature. I probably just, totally erased an entire body of literature by saying that, because I'm too fucking lazy to
and you're like,
go to JSTOR. Right. It's like people have written like thousands of books on it. Like, yeah, that's 100%.
There's 1,000 books out on it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. What about if they don't get laughs? Is that too far? Like the lack of laughs, or like the booze? I don't know. Is that?
So I think that's really interesting. And I actually think that, the kind of one, like just reading the one paper I was talking about with the norm violation theory of humor, the one thing that I was, that I would be curious would be what the author of that paper has to say about the role the audience plays, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's not enough attention played to the audience side of it when we're talking about when we're talking about just jokes in general. So I think that if something doesn't get laughs, I think aesthetically that might mean that it's a bad joke. Mm-hmm. I think if we're judging the ethics of what was said or the permissibility of what was uttered, whether or not it gets laughs, I think there's lots of factors to think about there, right? I think that, if somebody is going on stage and, spewing hate speech under the guise of comedy, and it's a audience of like white supremacists or Nazis or something, and everyone's laughing it up. Like, no, of course those laughs are insignificant when you evaluate the permissibility of what was said, or at least the content of what was said, or something like that, right? Just as like So I don't know. One really cool thing, and this is like getting off topic, but Kelly Bachman, I don't know, she like stood up to Harvey Weinstein and was like so she really capitalized on that moment, and like her brand of comedy is like, I was raped and we're gonna laugh about it. And I think that's awesome. She did a whole thing during New York City Comedy Week or whatever, called like Rape Jokes for Rape Survivors. And like, it was like people that were raped would come and listen to these jokes, and like, that's who it attracted. Right. But I've seen rape survivors tell jokes to roomfuls of people who might not have been rape survivors and get no laughs, and then walk off stage and feel like, oh, I went too far. Oh, I'm a piece of shit for making that joke because no one laughed. And I don't think that's, do you know what I'm saying? And so
you can't always gauge it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think so. And I also think like, you're teasing out an important distinction between just like aesthetically judging a joke, like how good of a joke is it, and is it okay to joke about this topic? Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I've heard the you should be able to go as far as you want, and then the laughs would be the judge, but you're like, it depends on the room.
The laughs would be, do you mean the laughs are the judge of how funny something is, or how permissible it is?
Permissibility almost of like I'm not like that. That's not funny. Like that's too far.
Mhm.
But I tend to like, yeah, the free speech thing is hard because you don't want it to be, because I actually saw a comedian, Nimesh Patel. He got taken off of stage at some university. I can't remember which one. Columbia, maybe. I don't
Oh,
remember.
I think I might have heard about this. I might
Yes,
have.
yes.
What
So
did he
he
say?
was on Rogan and he talked about it. So like, so
Okay.
he
Yeah.
made a joke about a black dude, about how that they don't choose to be gay, like because
Hmm.
they've already got, like, and he's also Indian, like
Hmm.
he's Indian,
Hmm.
so he's not even a white dude, anyway, so
Hmm.
he's a brown
Hmm.
dude, but he's like, black people don't choose to, because it's a guy that, like, on his way up to his New York apartment, like it was just like, it was something he observed. He was like, gay
Interesting.
as a picnic basket, and he's like, he didn't choose to be gay, because this is how people don't choose to be gay. At least, like, why would a black dude choose to, like, oh, like another layer of oppression,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And he got called off. Like, he got, like, the organizers turned off his
Yeah.
mic and pulled him off stage
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
that joke. And I'm like,
Interesting.
that that joke. So anyways, but it wasn't like,
I wonder.
they literally cut his mic. That was like, it was just very abrupt.
What did he say? What did like did you know, like I'll have to read that and see like what like other people. I mean, I tend to think in terms of judging the offensiveness of jokes that like I'm not the like my whatever my identities or whatever are not the subject of. I tend to be like, I'll see what people that might have actually been harmed by or offended by the joke,
Yeah.
what they have to say about it. I like tend to take that route, but I think I don't know. I mean, I think it's
But
tough.
it was
I
like a
think that
pro. It was like, oh, but
yeah.
this is like pro them. Like, this was supposed, like, it wasn't even
Oh, but so highlighting oppression, the fact that like, oh, you're oppressed. Why would you choose to be more oppressed? Because both groups are oppressed.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally see like the intent behind why he was doing it.
If it was a joke that was a racist joke, and they cut the
Yeah.
mic, that makes it more muddled, right? But when the joke I thought was fine,
Mm.
and it was just these, like, like, it was really funny the way he described it. He's like, it's just these, like, two little Asian girls coming up and be like, okay, thank you, Mr. Patel, bye, like, escorting
I,
him off stage.
Oh, that's yeah. I'll have to read the article, and I'd be curious to see just like how the whole thing went down. I don't know, but that's the thing, right? I think like
He had to go play
I
another
think
set. He
people.
had to go across town to play another set after. So, like,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
but he actually had
Yeah.
he said that his Instagram, like, blew up with messages of support. And some people actually followed him from that club. Sorry, I don't know if I knew this from Joe Rogan, or I actually he came to my city and I went to see him, so he explained some more things as well. So, like, some people from the university set traveled to
Yeah.
his next set to say, because he was escorted off, no one could talk to him after, so they actually went to his other set
Wow.
and were like, hey
Yeah.
man, just want to say, like, some black dudes even too, you're like, just want to say we loved you and sorry about our school being ridiculous. So he did have some
Right.
support. He totally
Well,
had support.
right. No, and I think yeah. That's I'll have to yeah, I'll definitely want to look I want to look into that. I think so one thing I think is that there's kind of this like thing that is said, at least like a lot of the the people that I know, we talk about like social issues of like social justice and comedy. So one thing that's often said is like, if you are not a member of this oppressed group, you do not get to make jokes about this oppressed group. And I would be, I mean, like, I really want to like look more into like, philosophical literature that actually like delineates why is that. We have this intuition, let's actually explore like why it's wrong, or why maybe the intuition isn't correct or something, you know what I mean? Like, I do want to, like, and it doesn't even have to be like academic philosophy, right? Like, it could be any type of things further exploring this intuition. But
It's
I am
almost like
really
a
interested.
coddling, like,
Yeah.
I could see it as a coddling, like, oh, like, we can make jokes about you white folk, but you can't make jokes about us because, like, we can't handle it. Like, I almost, I that would be the side that I would imagine would be, some would be like, we can handle it, thanks. Like, we can handle, like, as long as it's not racist. Like, we can handle the Nimesh Patel joke about not choosing to be gay.
Yeah.
Like, again, that's just like me pulling out like what would be like the argument for.
I definitely think like if the intent of the joke was like, I want to show how both of these groups are oppressed and I want to make it fun. Like, I want to use comedy to talk about these, like, you know, like real political issues, then like, yeah, I think sometimes jokes can be, and this is the thing too, I've seen comics in like the most like woke, you know, progressive, queer friendly, femme friendly, you know, whatever kind of like Brooklyn mics. I have seen like people get up there and think they're making a really progressive, edgy point, and it just falls so flat. And what they say just feels so weird. And the people that are kind of the topic of that joke are like really like feel really uncomfortable. But I've also seen people that are the topic of those kinds of joke laugh and be like, and know the joke doesn't work, but like laugh at it and be like, well, I thought it was funny. And so like, you know, people like don't have a, you know, obviously like a hetero, what's the word for it? Like, people don't have like the same opinion on all of it, but this is what I'm saying, why, like, and I think you would agree with this, like, I would love to just like have more discussions with like different people debating, and I just want to see that happen, like a panel or something of comedians of like all different social locations, like actually like talking about this stuff and like getting into interesting arguments. And one thing I will say is I don't think there is enough of that anymore.
Yes.
I worry about that kind of being,
because like, you have to step over the line to be funny. Right? Isn't there a bit of a like it's not too far, but it's farther than I would in my day job, you know, like that kind of a feeling?
I mean, again, that intuition's an interesting one too. I think there's a sense in which you have, like, for something to be funny, I think it has to hit in a way, at least for some things, should hit in a way that, like, if you say something and someone is laughing while also feeling like maybe a little bit uncomfortable by how true it is for something. Yeah. I mean, obviously, when it comes to like people making stereotypes, if people think, oh, that stereotype is true, like that's bullshit, obviously. But like things about, like, I don't know, like I'm trying to think of a good examples of it. But yeah, I guess I'm sympathetic to the idea that if it's like that, there has to be something that is like socially taboo. Yeah.
No, I think that if you are doing a set and you get a standing ovation, you know, or like claps rather than laughs, that's when you're like, oh, you're like just did a speech. Like you just did a little speech.
That's so funny. Yeah, I know a lot of comedians that have been. Some of my comedian friends talk about that a lot. They call it clapter. They say you got clapter, you get laughter. Yeah. That's a very that's totally a thing. And people do say that, you know, if you get claps like woo, yay, instead of like ha ha ha. But I do think I think we're moving in that direction, unfortunately, a little bit. I think so.
I just want to laugh. Okay. We've gone for like a while, girl. I think we should like wrap this up. Is there anything else that you like wanted to talk about?
No, I think it's really cool that you have, like, I was looking at your YouTube channel. It seems like you're committed to like having a diverse array of perspectives and stuff and having interesting conversations. And like, this was such a fun time. I think that's so cool too. I think that like right now that's like so important. And I think that's awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So honored to like, be a part of like what you're doing. That's really cool.
I was like super pumped to get you on because I'm like, I need to get your story. So awesome.
Yeah, also, everyone's watching, follow me on Twitter because that's the only reason I did. No, I'm just kidding.
No. You're like, it was like a part of the reason.
But
yeah. No. I'll definitely put your information. Do you have a blog as well?
Yes, I do. It's right now.
I'll put it in the description.
I will say. Yeah. I'll send you. I will say, like, obviously, like PSA to people watching that want to follow me. Like, like I talk about trauma and kink and, you know, sex and stuff. So 18 and over. Yeah. And if you're offended by that,
I'll give a little like, preamble. And
okay.
Like, it's 18 plus today, folks.
Yeah.
No, but I love it. Okay, awesome. Okay, this is so great, and I learned actually so many things I didn't know about the industry, and that's always like my favorite thing is to like new things I didn't know before. Woo! So awesome. Okay, good times. Okay. Thanks so much for coming on, Rachel.
Thanks, Andrea.